In life, we are on a constant pursuit for our slice of the pie. The pie comes in many forms, whether it's starting a business, higher education, pursuing a career, raising a family, and the list continues. The burdens we face during our pursuit is lessened when we are financially fit. The Breadwinners created a platform where we can discuss finances and entrepreneurship in a judgment-free space. We're striving to encourage healthy financial discussions amongst our peers to capture our slice, until we no longer want a slice and would rather bake our own cake. So growing up, TV dads were like the thing,
Right.
Especially for me. Early 90s, we had TGI Friday, and we had a strong representation of us. And thinking about the TV dads back then with George Jefferson and later on Uncle Phil,
Right.
it was pretty cool for us. But with the Jeffersons, what I really loved was how they represented wealth and how they represented us getting a piece of our pie.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think of slice of pie, what does that mean to you?
So when I think of slice of pie, I think of something that you can call your own, something that belongs to you, something that that you, I want to say earned. I think that's the word I want. That you earned, and that's yours, and that's non-negotiable. Is the word I want to use. So when you're able, like even with what you said with the Jeffersons, it was an interesting contrast to some of the other shows that were out, you know, that normalize a way of life for our community. So you were able to see yourself get something that wasn't attainable for the African American community. So that's what I liked about the Jeffersons, is that it showed that this is something that's attainable and something that's earnable, that you worked hard for. So when I think, that's kind of what I think when I think of slice of pie, is something that is yours, something that's non-negotiable and that's earned, which makes it sweeter.
Absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Ownership is really big for me, because when I think of a slice of pie, I think of ownership. When I think of ownership, I think of legacy, and I think of things that I can pass down to the next generation of Locketts. And my slice is pursuing that endlessly. One of my mottos is, I'd rather suffer defeat than live with regret.
Oh, that's good.
So that was my motto for 2021. And for 2022, it's make it make sense.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't make sense, I'm not doing it. So before we get started, can you please let us know who you are, your business, and everything?
Yes, Billie Gilliam. I am a licensed professional, a clinical counselor, a licensed independent chemical dependency counselor. So I work with couples, individuals, sometimes with families, but mostly individuals, for a wide range of mental health issues. Your garden variety, I don't want to minimize it, but depression, anxiety, but a whole host of other mental health issues. But I also work with a lot of couples as well.
Okay, absolutely. I think that's super needed, well needed.
In this time, yes.
And the name of your business?
Oh, Parker Counseling and Consulting.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really big. When I saw you on LinkedIn, I said, I gotta reach out, and I have to, because I think it's so important, especially not just our community, but for all communities, is to address the things that we're dealing with and understanding that we don't have to do it alone.
Yes, and especially now, because I'm seeing two things I'm seeing more of. I'm seeing more African Americans in counseling and more men, because that's a dramatic shift. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, was not a thing. And so now it's so very different, you know. So I am very happy with that.
Of course. I mean, even me growing up, my dad's a military man through and through. I didn't think my dad was human until some years ago, where we had a scare, and I saw the human side of him, and it was so refreshing, because, you know, the first person, my superhero growing up, a boy superhero, is his dad. So you're going to emulate his actions. And since my dad was this big military, he was like straight, no nonsense. And since he was like that, we often emulated his behavior.
Yes.
But I think it's super important, because it's okay to talk about what's going on inside. And I think it's great because you can talk to people that what's going on with you, and they may have like a similar situation, or they've been through that, and it's like, oh man, I can do this too, or I can get through this without making an irrational decision.
Right. And so you emulated his presence but people also will emulate the absence if he's not there, right? You know, so
Yeah.
those things. That's why I love that individuals are starting to come a lot more, and the stigma has reduced. It's still there, but it's not nearly as bad. You know, now I almost feel like a therapist has entered a different status because people are talking about it so much. Well, my therapist said, and that used to not be a thing. We were something that you kept in the closet along with a whole host of things that are no longer in the closet, but it's just very different today. But I have an appreciation for it now. I do have a real appreciation.
So it was like a bad thing?
Oh, I was a secret. If you were coming to see me,
Yeah.
I was a secret in our community. Not when I work with white people or anything like that. I was not a secret, but definitely within our community, no one wanted to say they were seeing a therapist because it means they were crazy, and that's not really what it is. People now will come to counseling just to process. People have no idea what that feels like when you need someone to talk things through. It doesn't mean you have to be hearing voices, or it doesn't have to be something dramatic going on in your life at all. But if a clinician is doing their job, they're not giving you advice. They are reflecting things back and allowing you to see things that are in your blind spots that you can't see. You know, so it's not necessarily you have to be going through something, because we all have blind spots, you know, and it helps us to kind of talk things out and process it, and a clinician can help us see a version of ourselves that we're not able to see or we're refusing to see.
So you mentioned that there was a shift.
Yes.
You said 10 years ago, something like that. Well, what do you think was the cause of that shift?
I think younger generations, you know, who don't have fear of feelings, and there's been a different shift when it comes to what a lot of things mean today. You know, I saw a billboard on East 79th, and it read, you know, something like, Brother, we need you, you know, and it was sponsored by the Adams Board and about African American men and mental health. And it was so refreshing, because that's not what we typically see. But I think as younger generations come, they start having more acceptance towards being able to process what's going on with them, which actually makes sense. And if I really want to say what I think the shift is, I think technology causes a shift. And the reason why that is, as social media allows us to get closer together, we're actually more isolated than ever. And with that increase in isolation comes a host of other mental health issues that we struggle with, you know. So there is a huge need for people to be able to adequately see themselves. Because if you only see yourselves in the lens of your app, you have a very distorted version of who you are.
And when you say app, you mean like Facebook?
Oh, I mean like
or
your social media is my apology.
Oh,
yeah, like social media, Facebook, Instagram. As we navigate life so much through these different applications, as nice as they are, they're not real life, you know. And so people are increasingly more distant, despite the fact I have more access. You know, I have more access to people, but we will be a lot more distance because we don't mind communicating via online all the time. And it's a very different thing to communicate online versus communicate in person. Even clinically, like now that we have the pandemic and I do everything online, it's not the same. I've lost about 70% of the communication that I'm used to getting from people.
You know what's crazy? When you say that, I think of my oldest son. And when he talks to girls, he's 17, so of course, right? But he'll ask for her Snap, like her Snapchat, and they'll just like snap each other. And I'm thinking, do you ever text? He said, no, we're just on Snap. And I'm thinking, what world are we living in?
Yes.
Oh, that's
I said
crazy.
that evolution we'll start seeing big thumbs and we'll lose our fingers and our voice boxes because all we do is this now. And I'm not demonizing social media or anything like that, but it doesn't take the place of real person interaction, and we lose communication skills. We lose them, you know, because that's what I see in a lot of younger individuals who struggle with relationships, because you really can't hold a real relationship by Snap.
You'll be amazed. It's so crazy. So what I found interesting is how much our professions are alike and how much emotions are connected to money.
Yes.
And I was reading this book, The Psychology of Money, and it gave me a different perspective on how I should approach my business and my clients to get a better understanding of who they are. because emotions are connected to every financial decision we make.
Yes.
And as I was going through the book, I was really like diagnosing myself because of my habits. And of course, my wife is like, love her to death. She's my biggest critic, but she's amazing. And there was this quote from Desmond Tutu. It said, "We must stop just pulling people out of the water. We must go upstream and find out why they're falling in."
Yes.
So
Yes.
from that quote, what's your initial thoughts on that?
That's awesome. So I'm all about. So I use an analogy where we talk about in mental health. A lot of clinicians will use CBT, which is called cognitive behavioral therapy, where we focus on we'll focus on somebody's thoughts that impacts their behaviors, right? And it's okay on the surface, but it's not really the whole story. Anybody can stop a behavior for a short period of time. That's like me going out and saying, okay, get the weeds out off the lawn, and what you do, you decide to use the lawnmower. Well, the weeds are gone, but they are coming back, because the problem is you haven't gotten to the root of that weed. You haven't gotten it, so it will grow itself back. So what I like is working on, just when you say on why they fall in, is excavating to help people understand where the roots come from. It's a longer process, but it's far more fruitful because you get to see yourself more adequately, and you can pull the roots out. The stuff that's necessary you can keep, and you can excavate the stuff that's no longer necessary, because we inherit narratives from others, our family members. We inherit mindsets, and so sometimes we need to understand, like, do I really believe that, or is that my mom, is that my dad? What do I actually believe? So it's hard to tease them apart.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's so refreshing to hear that and to see how a lot of different industries are connected. Because emotions play every decision. It goes from, okay, should I do this? Should I not do this? Does it fit within my budget? If it doesn't fit within my budget, people still going to make the decision to purchase. And it's like, okay, from processing the information to whatever goes on up here to saying, okay, forget it, I'm just going to swipe and keep it moving and just suffer the consequences or figure it out.
Yes.
It's how do we get to that point to where we're saying, okay, from a psychology perspective, how are we going to make this change? So a question to you is, what are some practices or some practices that people can use to say, okay, to address these behaviors?
So hugely awareness, and part of that awareness is understanding what's called visceral reactivity. And visceral reactivity is that these emotions reside in your body. We get signals from the environment that helps us navigate how we feel about things. And so I tell people, emotions are indicators. They don't say what things are. It's like the check engine light of your car. The check engine light of your car is not diagnostic. It just says something's wrong, So your feelings should be just indicators, but they're not. People use the feelings to make decision making, And so if you don't have awareness of that, then you will make decisions based on how you feel. And so I tell people, feelings will get behind the wheel of the car while logic is sitting in the back, cause a 17 pile up, and then jump out and be like, it was good, So if you don't have awareness, you will continue to live in those cyclical types of behaviors. So the very first thing is a huge connection between mind and body, and the West have a difficult time with that because we stay up here. We're very cognitively driven, and we don't pay a lot of attention to how our body is responding, because that's where emotions come out of. We have a visceral response to things, a quickening of the heart, something tightens. We have all of that. We don't realize it because it happens so fast. But if I can tune in to how my body is responding to something, then I can say, where is that coming from? Why am I feeling that? And even helping people understand, like if they want to, you say people just swipe the card and keep it going. What was uncomfortable? What in that product was going to allow you to have a level of comfortability, and why, and helping people kind of navigate how their body is actually talking to them.
You know what, that makes perfect sense, because you think about credit card debt. And It's like ranked number 4, I believe now. It's behind home, auto, student loans, not in that particular order, but I know it's number 4. It's behind those 3. And of course, you think about a house. Okay, you have home debt, but your home is you have equity in your house. Then you have a car. You need a car. You may not need that Mercedes, but you need a car, right? So then it comes to student loans. Unfortunately, we're in a space where it's like you got to have a college degree to get a job, and every year college just goes up, and it's insane. I'm putting my kid through college this fall. So
oh wow, yes.
Luckily, he's going to Kent, so we're we're thrilled with the tuition guarantee. But now we're at the point where okay, we have these emotions and we are aware of these emotions, but we're not quite there yet to address them. We're kind of like in denial. But a big question is, can money buy happiness?
Money buys happiness. I think money buys access. I don't know if I think that money buys happiness, and I have a different mindset on happiness anyway. That's why I laughed when you said that.
Lay it on us.
I don't know how this sounds. I don't seek happiness. I seek contentment. I think happiness comes in spurts. I think there are times I have incredible happy moments, but if I constantly am seeking this high space, I'm going to be disappointed a lot because that's not what typically it is. But if I'm not content, that's a real problem. I really seek having contentment, but I'm going to have moments of extreme happiness and joy. Very rarely when people say how you doing today, very rarely if I'm going to hear anybody say, oh, I'm happy. Like I'd never hear that.
Our thing is I'm good.
Usually people say I'm good, but which is a level of contentment if it's real.
But what does that really mean though?
What, contentment?
No, that, and when they say I'm good, because when I say I'm good, it just comes out. I can be having a horrible day, but it's like I'm good.
Oh, you're being an American because we really don't care how you feel. Like we just it's a nicety that we're even asking. But when people really give you an answer, people are shocked, going, "Oh, I really didn't want that." But by contentment, I mean there's a level of satiation. You're satisfied, And I don't know if you've ever had like a good meal, and after a while you're like, "Wow, I'm like." That was good. And like you're satisfied, and it's just okay. And that's it, And it's not a melancholy keeping things below a certain things. No, it's just that you are pretty satisfied with the way things are, even if they're not all the way up here, and they're also not all the way down here either, So I seek to be content because I notice most people are not content because they're seeking happy, And happy is not bad. It's just, to me, it's a peak. They're peaks, But if I live in a contentment, I'm going to be fine, kind of regardless. And I mean like fine for real fine, not fine, American fine.
Like I'm good. Don't worry about it, dude. I'm good. So that makes perfect sense because I'm going to assume that when we're content, that means we're happy. Well, we're not happy, but we're in a place where if something good happens, something bad happens, we're going to be even keel. Okay, that makes perfect sense. It certainly does. In our world, the financial space, I'm a financial planner, and by being a financial planner, I like to check people's emotions at the door. And I'm still trying to figure out how to dig deeper to, one, get them to really express what's going on with them from a financial perspective, because oftentimes people really look over the importance of budgeting. And what happens is they get themselves in a financial pickle where they have an absorbent amount of debt and they don't have enough income to satisfy that debt. So that entire emotion it's really difficult to explain, but you have to address it. So for people that are, they understand that they're not doing the right thing, how do you get them to come to that realization, say, hey, you're in this place and here's what's going to happen if you continue to go down this place?
So it's easy for us to start off with like the behaviors, right? Like what a person is doing wrong. Even in counseling, I can see the behaviors people are doing that are not adaptive, but it doesn't mean anything if I just highlight those things, because sometimes those behaviors are coping skills. And so if you take someone's coping skills away, it feels uncomfortable, and uncomfortability feels unsafe to people. And when you make people feel unsafe, they protect those behaviors, For me, it's important to understand how a person got there and what that particular behavior, what does it serve? all our maladaptive behaviors serve us in some way, right? It's just important for us to know how they serve us. We can all talk about how my inability to stop shopping is maladaptive, how it's not good. But I do need to know, how does it actually serve me? Most of us don't take the time to find out, what do I actually get from this, so I can find another way to get that, or at least to understand it so I can make shifts if there's something behind that that shopping issue or whatever issue I have, so I can navigate that space so I don't have to have this outcome anymore.
That makes sense. Question for you. Does your environment growing up plays a factor in how you are with, let's say, with money or with your emotions as an adult?
Oh, huge.
Or is that an excuse?
An excuse. I would say it's an explanation. It's the word I would use. Words are important to me, but it's just, yes, it's an explanation. And even let's go with the word excuse. I think the difference is excuse, explanation. The issue is the word that is the real problem is justification. Does it justify? Not necessarily, but it does explain behavior. So I completely agree that we absorb messages that are overt and covert, right? We absorb messages of what people say to us, and then we absorb messages from what we actually see, So even growing up with myself, I remember my mom was not one to, buy a whole bunch of things or a whole bunch of tops or a whole bunch of clothes or anything. She never really was. So I figure if I had, as an adult, if I had 5 of something or 7 of something, I had enough. Right. And then I ended up with friends, right? And they were like, you need more than that. And they easily transformed me. So, but it was nothing she said. It was what I saw, So yeah, I do think that we have to unlearn and unbecome, so that way we can decide who we are and what we want that to look like. But yeah, we get a lot of messages from our upbringing for sure. And not just from our people we see, even what we absorb media-wise, what we take in.
Yeah, for me, growing up, I hit my high school time, 99, 2000, early 2000s, and at that time, it was the cash money era, right? So we had to be flashy. So we used to catch the bus up to Randall Park Mall.
Oh, I remember that.
And we used to, you remember the kiosk in the middle? They used to sell the jewelry, the chains, the earrings. So we used to spend money, these big old diamond earrings and the chains, and we'll walk out of there with like $200 worth of jewelry, but it made us feel good. And I was a sneakerhead, big time sneakerhead. I'm like a retired sneakerhead now. But when COVID happened, I sold a lot of my sneakers. At one point, I had over 400 pairs of shoes.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's the word I'll use.
So by me having all these shoes, one day I'm in the basement, and when COVID happened, it put me in a position where I can just take a step back and breathe. And I just spent time with my family. But luckily, we were in a really good position to where we didn't have to worry about things because of the accounts and the assets that we had already accumulated. But when I'm looking at my sneakers, I said, I can't give these to my kids. Like I'm gonna give these to Max and Jason. Like, here you go. My oldest already wear a 10, so his foot is already bigger than mine. So I sold my collection, and it was a part of the process of me changing my mindset as to what I do with the money. But if you were to put in clinical terms, what is that, hoarding, or what would be the issue of me just collecting? Because I'll give you a little bit more information. So I got into sneakers, right, because I love Michael Jordan in the 90s. Jordan was my guy. But I got into sneakers for girls because girls love elementary school. This kid always had all the Jordans. The girls liked them, so I'm like, sweet, I want the shoes, right? But as I got older, it became, I didn't need the shoes to get girls, but I still wanted the shoes. So from a clinical perspective, what is that? How would you address that, say, with the problem?
I wouldn't, say hoarding. I've seen hoarding, and it's pretty bad. But so just to kind of go back to some of the things that you had said regarding the flashiness and going to the mall, buying jewelry, things of that nature. People buy status, We buy status, and as in our community, it makes sense because if you're displaced, you don't have status, you don't have power. So we buy status, which gives us power, which when you boil it down to the salt is love. That's all we're buying for real. All we're buying is love. And I have a whole mindset on that word anyway, but that's all we're actually buying. And so when we do that, we seek love from others coming from the outside. That's all we're seeking. So I don't know if I necessarily see it. And then we get caught up in the cyclical behavior of doing it, right? We no longer need it, but we're still caught up in that behavior because it's what we do. You know, you see something and a pair of shoes that you didn't have before, or it has this on it or that on it. You go through the same behaviors because we are very stimulus response driven, you know, more than we like to believe. But if you don't have insight into that, well, you know, you'll continue to kind of do that over and over again. But that's what I would see, not necessarily a hoarding, but more of we purchase status, you know, and status gives us power, you know, and then power gives us love.
That makes perfect sense. And in our book, it's a part of behavioral finance. And one of the things is money status. And one of the description was my self-worth equals my net worth. And I have to keep up an appearance. And I'm thinking, not really, but really? You know, I started to look inside. And speaking of that, is inside out, looking inside out and outside in, is that a thing?
Oh my God, I love that. So yes, I am a huge proponent of living from the inside out versus from the outside in, but I wasn't always like that. So what does that mean? So I see and I use a waterbed as an analogy. So back when I was younger, these waterbeds used to be super popular, right? And so
the 80s?
Yes, used to be super popular. But if you were to jump on the waterbed, right, it would move, it would be all over the place. It had to be terrible for your back. The other person sleeping next to you couldn't get rest because there was so much motion transfer, right? But then in the early 2000s, they came out with these Tempur-Pedics, you know. In the Tempur-Pedics, they would put a glass of wine at the edge of the bed, and you can jump on it, but that glass of wine would never spill over, right? Because it was called, you know, it was no motion transfer. And I see the same in terms of living from the inside out. So if you're living from the outside in, you're living where the environment impact your emotions, which impact your spirit or even how you think, right? So, but if you're living from the inside out, is, you know, your spirit or your thoughts impact your emotions that helps you navigate the world, you know. So the reason why the Tempur-Pedic beds, the stuff's never going to fall over, is because of what's on the inside of it. So it doesn't matter what's on the outside. It don't matter what's happening, you know. But if you live from the outside in, you're going to be snatched regardless of any direction because that's how the environment is taking you. So where culture is, so are you, you know. So it makes sense that if people say, oh, these shoes are what's popular now, then if you're living from the outside in, you're going to do that. Because you don't have a strong enough constitution from the inside to say, I don't really want that, and I don't really need that.
You know, it's crazy. So I teach financial literacy workshops at high schools and colleges. So for us growing up in high school, of course, we wanted nice things, right? So we had Jordans, we had Fat Farm, we had Anichi, we had all that stuff, right? I'm sounding old for saying all these things, Pelly Pelly and all that stuff. But nowadays, these kids took it up a notch.
Yeah.
So when I go into these workshops, I see kids with Billionaire Boys Club. I see kids with, I mean, that's just a regular day. Ralph Lauren is like a Tuesday for them. We're talking Fendi, we're talking Versace, we're talking expensive $300-400 sweatshirts. And I'm thinking, oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Like how? You know, how? And for me, it's like, okay, how do we address this? Because clearly, we're not going anywhere with this. But I can only imagine a 16, 17-year-old is not going to listen. I mean, are they, or is that something that's taught at home?
I think they could. I think what happens is that we are passive recipients of information. And there's a concept called, I might mispronounce it, conspicuous consumerism. And that's a concept where you live beyond your means, right? That's a concept where, like, if you buy name brand, it has to be shown everywhere because it's you gaining power and status. I do believe it most definitely can be done because it's not in every culture, you know. I do think that if we were to teach things at home, but I also think we have to be more responsible in saying what media is telling us about us, right? You know, when my kids were young, I mean, they're adults young now, but when they were young and they would listen to certain songs, I wouldn't tell them what they couldn't listen to because they were going to listen to it outside of me anyway.
Right.
What I did was to say, let's talk about what these lyrics are actually saying to you. Because if you're going to sing it, I need to know exactly what you're saying, you know. So they weren't passive recipients of information. And they're not now, you know. So that to me is something that we have to teach. But if we're not teaching it in a legacy or generational way, we just pass our same mindset over and over again.
Oh my God.
If that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. I'm just thinking about me, and it's weird. So what about our environment? Does that play a role in that? So, because you mentioned influence, and then for us, influence music and entertainment. But we see all the athletes, they don't wear regular stuff. They wear expensive clothing, but they can swing it though because it's in their budget.
It's in their budget.
But for us, it's like we want to look rich, and not for everyone though. But for a lot of us, it's like we want to get rich. And that's how a lot of people get themselves in a financial situation where they can't get out of or making some of those decisions. So how would you address it?
You know, I have this one person I work with, and I'll never forget when she was really upset because he didn't buy her a $4,000 purse, right? And I was thinking about that. I was like, I can't even think about where I would buy a $4,000 purse at, right?
Saks.
Like, wow. I was like, something to put something in, you know? But that has such meaning. It has real meaning for her, you know? And it was intriguing for me because it has absolutely no meaning for me. You know, I have a $30 purse from Marshalls, and I didn't think about it. It's just not, purses are just not my thing. But I think that in terms of environment, it has such a huge influence that we want to emulate something that we think is important, but we're told over and over again, this is important. This is what we're told. Someone sent me a video of how all these individuals, all these young kids are seeking to be basketball players, right? We got millions of kids who are trying to fulfill 7 jobs that's only going to last 4 years anyway, you know. Because we tell people this is what's important, you know. And I love that now, even in movies, we're starting to see better versions of ourselves that are not athletes, that are not. We have to see these images,
right,
because we become what we believe is possible, you know. So that's the one thing that Obama was like, just seeing him was so good for.
Oh my God.
It was so good because there are kids who are like 8 years old. That's all they knew was a black. That's crazy to me. Like that's all you know? Wow. But you have to see what is possible so you can know that that's you too, because you don't even realize the absence of something is actually teaching you too.
Oh my God, you couldn't said it better. So I want to flip it. So in our world, we call it money scripts. And money scripts is money vigilance, money status, money worship, and money avoidance. So we covered money status and money worship, where it's like, okay, we gotta look the part, we gotta look good. But on the flip side is money vigilance. And that one is people that underspend, people that come in right at their target for their budget or under budget, but feel guilty or feel a negative way about themselves if they spent money on themselves. Although they have it, they just refuse to spend it. I know a lot of people like that.
Where they do that?
No, I know a lot of people that are like that, where they have a sense of guilt, or if they want to buy themselves something nice, but they just can't muster it up to buy themselves something nice, so they'll buy something for their kids or for someone else, which their kids and they already have. They're good, but they still won't splurge on themselves, although they deserve it.
That does say something to me about a person's self-concept, about what they're worth and what it means for them to have something. And a lot of times people grew up with that. You know, there's something they were guilted into saying they were always selfish, or it was always about them, or they were acclimated to being the martyr. And the martyr is where you throw yourself on the flames for everyone else. but you would never, you would never do it for yourself. I have one guy I work with, and he used a sentence that was so powerful. He said he would murder for others, but wouldn't fight for himself at all, and he wouldn't. And it's absolutely true. Like, he would look after you, but he would never do it for himself. But he was also taught that he wasn't worth it either, And so when you have that type of thing going on, someone has to work at building who they are so they can see that, oh, I am worth that. I can have that, and that's okay for me. Not just a concept. Now, if it's different, if their mindset goes into, I'm going to go into financial ruin, that's a different thought process and problem. But the way you're describing it is that I feel guilty, or I can't have, or I shouldn't have. But I suspect that's largely because of how they were brought up and how people spoke to them about who they were and what their worth was or is.
That's insane, because I have no issue. If it's within my budget, I have no issue. But I know people that just won't do it, and I'm thinking we have to find balance.
Yes.
And it's one of the things in our world where you being fiscally responsible, meaning you can't buy nice things. And I tell everyone all the time, you have to find balance. Of course, if you take care of your responsibilities, like maxing out your retirement, you're setting up your budget, you're executing those goals, you have discretionary income. It's okay to buy yourself something. Please buy yourself. Celebrate the small wins. Celebrate it, because tomorrow's not promised.
Right.
And of course, we have things in place to take care of your family if you're not here tomorrow. I pray that you are, but we just don't know. But you have to live too. So take the vacation if it's in your budget.
Yes.
So lastly, tell us about your book.
Oh, so I wrote a book called The Session, and I wrote it because most self-help books are boring. It's going to be for real. And rarely do we finish them, rarely do we get through the whole story. And people, I find, are very narratively driven. People learn through stories, And if you tell a story, people can pick out and remember things and apply to self. So that was the whole purpose of the book, was to write a book about relationships. So there's 3 relationships in that book. And it was designed so people can learn more about themselves and or their relationships. And also for the therapist, because, you got to have drama, because drama is attractive,
Lifetime Movie Network.
There's drama in there. But at the end of the day, it's all about people stop living in the avatar on what we present to the world and being really authentic to themselves first. Because we lie to ourselves first.
Oh.
And that is the most detrimental lie. Because I tell people, if anything, be honest with you. Like if you, I don't want you to lie to other people, but if you lie to anybody, do not let it be you. So that book is largely about the life, death, and resurrection of relationships.
And where can we find it?
On Amazon right now, under Billie, Gilliam in this Session. I think there's a couple of them, but the cover of it has a chair that's on fire.
And if we wanted to book a session with you, what's the best way to reach? How can we get in contact with you?
Okay, there's my email is parkerstherapy@gmail.com, and my number is 216-339-6682.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate being here. Thank you so much.
Anytime.